Welcome to the deep dive. I'm so incredibly glad you decided to join us today because we're getting into something that honestly affects every single person who works in an organization, or on a team, or frankly just, interacts with other human beings trying to get things done.
It really is a universal challenge,
Yeah.
and it's one that often leaves leaders just pulling their hair out.
Yeah.
We are looking at the invisible forces that dictate whether a team succeeds or completely falls apart over time.
Yeah, and our source material for this deep dive is a highly detailed presentation. It's on the Shingo model and the Shingo Insight maturity check. This was put together by Evgeny.
Right.
He's an affiliated trainer with the Shingo Institute. And for a little background, if you aren't familiar, the Shingo Institute is based at the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. They are essentially the gold standard for researching organizational and operational excellence.
They really shape the cultures that drive excellence globally.
Mhm.
And the presentation we're unpacking today is, well, it's a masterclass in understanding how that actually happens,
Right.
rather than just hoping it happens.
Exactly. Hoping isn't a strategy. So, our mission for today's deep dive is to solve a massive, incredibly frustrating mystery in the business world. We're going to figure out why organizations that implement continuous improvement strategies almost always see a swift decline after their initial gains.
The dreaded backslide.
Yes, the backslide. We're going to look at the missing link that most companies completely ignore and learn exactly how to measure the invisible forces that are secretly running your workplace right now.
Because once you see the workplace through this lens, it fundamentally changes how you view every meeting, every process, and every failure.
Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever noticed this frustrating loop in your own life? Maybe a company you work for, or even just a small team you manage, decides to implement a new improvement strategy.
Happens all the time.
Right, you roll out a new software, a new workflow, or maybe one of those corporate initiatives with a flashy name. At first, it feels amazing. You get great results for a few months, everyone is high-fiving, and then,
Momentum just vanishes.
yes, you completely lose steam, and before you know it, you are right back to the old, inefficient way of doing things.
That phenomenon is exactly where the Shingo Institute's research begins. Years ago, they started noticing a very specific, very common trend among organizations that were trying to drive a culture of continuous improvement. The data showed that initial gains were consistently accompanied by a swift decline.
So it wasn't just a fluke.
No, it wasn't an anomaly at all. It was the standard pattern. Companies would put in a massive amount of effort, get a spike in productivity or quality, and then almost immediately backslide.
I've seen that happen, but it always feels like a mystery when it does. I mean, usually management just blames the employees for losing focus. Like, oh, they just got lazy.
Right, the blame game.
But our source material today claims to have the actual answer. What was the missing piece?
The massive realization from the Shingo Institute was that these companies were focusing entirely on tools and processes. They were completely obsessed with the mechanics of the work. If you think about the corporate jargon we hear all the time.
Lean initiatives.
Exactly. Lean initiatives, which are all about cutting waste. Or Six Sigma, which is about reducing errors. Or agile software development. These are all fantastic tools. But companies were deploying them while missing a massive critical dimension.
Which is,
They were completely ignoring culture.
wait, isn't culture just one of those vague buzzwords like having a ping pong table in the break room or doing trust falls at a corporate retreat?
That is the popular misconception. But no, culture is the actual operating system of the company. These leaders were trying to change the output without changing the environment that creates the output.
Oh, that makes sense.
There's a quote in the source material from Edgar Schein, a professor at the MIT Sloan School of Management, that anchors this entire concept. He said, and I quote, "The only thing of real importance that leaders do is to create and manage culture. If you do not manage culture, it manages you, and you may not even be aware of the extent to which this is happening."
If you do not manage culture, it manages you. That is a heavy statement. But practically speaking, what does that look like on a random Tuesday at the office?
Let's say you invest millions of dollars in the best project management software in the world to increase transparency. That's your new tool.
Right.
But if your underlying culture is one of fear and blame, where people are routinely punished for making mistakes, no one is going to log their true progress in that software.
They'll just hide it.
Exactly. They're going to hide their delays. The culture of fear will completely overwrite the tool of transparency. The culture manages the outcome. And as Shine notes, you might not even realize it's happening until the project is a year late.
Wow. The tool is useless if the environment rejects it. So if culture is the secret software running the whole operation, what does a good culture actually look like according to the Shingo Institute?
This brings us to the first major insight from the Shingo model. Insight number one is that ideal results require ideal behaviors. You cannot get excellent, sustainable outcomes by accident.
Right, it takes intention.
The presentation defines ideal behaviors very clearly. They are actions that create outcomes that produce results, and those results are both excellent and sustainable.
So it's not just about hitting a quota this month, because anyone can get a great result for one quarter by burning out their staff, forcing everyone to work 80-hour weeks. But that's not ideal behavior.
Because it's going to lead to massive turnover the next quarter.
Exactly.
A short-term spike at the cost of long-term health is a failure in this model. It has to be sustainable. But this naturally brings up a major hurdle. You cannot simply walk into a factory or an office, send out a memo, and mandate everyone must now behave ideally.
Yeah, human beings definitely do not work that way.
Willpower alone does not scale.
No, it doesn't. I can barely mandate myself to behave ideally when a plate of cookies is in the room.
Right.
So if we can't just tell people to do better, what actually makes people behave the way they do at work?
That is Shingo Insight number two. Purpose and systems drive behavior. Your behavior is a direct response to the overarching purpose of the organization, combined with the systems you are forced to operate within every single day.
Okay, so you have these systems, but systems is another one of those terms that can mean everything and nothing. What are the actual systems we're talking about here?
The Shingo model categorizes them into three essential systems. First, you have management systems. The focus here is entirely on leading the organization.
So like leadership and strategy.
Yes, this dictates how decisions are made, how resources are allocated, how strategy is communicated from the top down.
I picture that as the steering wheel of the company. What's the second system?
Second, you have work systems. The focus here is on the actual workflows. How does a physical product get built on an assembly line? Or in a corporate setting, how does a piece of data move from a sales rep to the accounting department? This is the engine.
Steering wheel, engine. And the third?
The third is the improvement system. The focus here is entirely on making the organization better. How do you capture new ideas from the frontline workers? How do you test innovations? How do you solve persistent, annoying problems that keep popping up?
That is a really clean way to look at a company. Management, work, and improvement. But how do you keep them from just turning into a dusty rule book that sits on a shelf and no one actually follows?
That is a critical point right there. A system needs a feedback loop to stay alive and actually evolve. The source material is very prescriptive about this, for every single one of those three systems to function properly.
Whether it's the work system or the management system.
Exactly. There are 5 specific communication tools that must exist.
What are those 5 tools?
Number 1 is standard work. There must be a documented baseline way of doing things.
Let's pause there, because standard work sounds a bit like corporate jargon. Can you give me a concrete example of what that actually means?
Sure. Think about something as simple as processing an invoice. If you have 3 different people in your accounting department, and they all process invoices using their own personal improvised methods, you don't have a baseline.
Right.
If you don't know the exact baseline of how a process is currently done, you can't possibly measure if a new idea actually improved it. Standard work is simply agreeing on the current best way to do a task and documenting it so everyone does it that way.
Until a better way is found.
Exact.
That clears it up. Without a baseline, you're just guessing. What's the second tool?
Number 2, reports. You need actual data to understand what is happening within that standard work.
Okay.
Number 3 is feedback. There must be a mechanism for people to respond to the reports and the standard work. If a worker notices the standard work is actually slowing them down, they need a way to say so.
So it's not just a one-way street for management.
Far from it.
Yeah.
Which leads to number 4, schedule. There needs to be a defined cadence for when these feedback conversations happen.
Oh, because otherwise it just gets pushed off indefinitely.
It can't just be whenever we have free time,
Yeah,
because we all know free time never happens.
never.
And finally, number 5, an improvement log. A dedicated place to track the changes you are trying to make based on that feedback so ideas don't just disappear into the void.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm getting this. Whether you are looking at how management leads, how the workflow operates, or how the company innovates, you need standard work, reports, feedback, schedule, and an improvement log.
That's the formula.
If you are missing one of those, say you don't have a schedule for feedback, the system breaks down and the behavior deteriorates.
And when the behavior deteriorates, you get that swift decline in results we talked about at the very beginning.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If we know that these systems drive human behavior, what drives the design of the systems?
Good question.
Because you could design a highly efficient system that is absolutely miserable to work in. How do you know you are building the right steering wheel and the right engine?
The presentation says the Shingo model uses guiding principles as the compass. Systems shouldn't be designed arbitrarily, or just based on whatever the CEO read in an airline magazine last week.
Right, the flavor of the month.
They must be aligned with timeless, universal principles. The Shingo model visualizes this as a pyramid with different dimensions of principles.
Instead of just listing all of them, let's dive deep into a couple so you listening can really picture this. What is the foundational layer of this pyramid?
The foundation is what they call cultural enablers. And a primary principle here is respect every individual.
How does that actually change a system, though? Every company says they respect individuals, but it's usually just lip service.
Let's look at how it changes a management system. If your system is designed purely to maximize hourly output, regardless of human cost, your feedback mechanisms will probably look like performance reprimands.
Like getting written up for being 2 minutes slow.
Exactly. But if your system is genuinely designed around the principle to respect every individual, your feedback system will include asking frontline workers for their input on how to improve the line, trusting their expertise, investing in their continuous training. The principle dictates the system design, which in turn dictates the behavior of the employees.
That is a massive difference. What sits above the cultural enablers on the pyramid?
The next dimension up is continuous improvement. A standout principle here is assure quality at the source.
Explain that one to me. What does at the source mean in this context?
Let's use a traditional factory as an example. In an old-school system, quality is checked at the very end of the line by a dedicated inspector with a clipboard.
Right.
If something was built wrong at step 2, it travels all the way to step 50 before anyone catches it, wasting all that time and material. Assure quality at the source flips this. It means empowering the person actually building the widget at step 2 to stop the entire assembly line if they spot a defect.
But stopping a whole line costs a fortune. I imagine that requires a massive amount of psychological safety.
It absolutely does, which is why it requires a culture-first approach.
Right.
If the worker fears they will be yelled at for stopping the line, they will just pass the defect down to the next person.
To avoid the blame.
Yes, the system requires the culture to function. Another great principle in this tier is embrace scientific thinking.
I love that one. That means your improvement system isn't based on whoever argues the loudest in a meeting or the highest paid person's opinion.
The APPO effect.
Exactly. It's based on hypotheses, testing, and actual data.
And finally, at the top of the pyramid, we have enterprise alignment. The guiding principles here are things like create value for the customer and think systemically, meaning you understand how a change in the accounting department impacts the sales team and the final customer, rather than just operating in a silo.
So what I'm gathering is that the Shingo model is completely different from a company just buying a Lean Six Sigma software package and calling it a day. It forces you to assess how well your underlying culture actually aligns with these specific guiding principles.
It is a culture-first approach to operational excellence. The tools only work if the culture can support them.
I hear that. However, that brings up a huge logistical problem.
What's that?
I can count how many widgets a machine produces. I can measure website traffic. Culture feels like a vibe. How on earth do you actually put a number on something as invisible and squishy as culture?
It is only squishy if you don't know what indicators to look for. Most leaders measure output because it's easy to count.
Sure.
The Shingo Institute developed a tool called Shingo Insight to prove you can actually quantify the environment creating that output.
Yeah.
It is an organizational culture survey focused specifically on behaviors, and it is not some new, untested theory. It has been perfected over the last 12 years.
The source notes it's used across a massive range of sectors. Pharma, energy, insurance, healthcare, agriculture. Basically, if you have humans working together, this tool applies. But logistically, how does this actually work? Do they just email a massive PDF to the team and hope people fill it out honestly?
Not quite. It is a highly structured, external, anonymous survey platform.
The anonymity has to be the most important part, right? Because if I think my manager is going to read my specific answers about how terrible our management system is, I'm going to lie.
Anonymity is absolutely non-negotiable for psychological safety in this context. It's also highly accessible. It's typically accessed via a simple QR code on any smart device.
Oh, I think that's brilliant, because if you send an email link, you're only surveying the people who sit at desks.
Exactly.
A frontline worker on a factory floor or a nurse in a hospital ward can just scan a QR code with their phone in the break room and participate. It democratizes the data.
That accessibility ensures you are getting a true cross-section of the culture. But the real magic is in what they ask. It usually starts with optional demographics. Then, interestingly, there's only one question on job satisfaction and 10 questions on job engagement.
Wait, only one question on satisfaction? I feel like most corporate surveys are entirely about whether people are happy. Why so few?
Because satisfaction and engagement are just trailing indicators. The real meat of the Shingo Insight survey is these 61 questions specifically on culture.
61 questions just on culture. What are they trying to get at with that volume?
That depth is necessary to mathematically map behaviors against all those guiding principles we discussed. They're asking specific behavioral questions to determine, are people actually leading with humility? Are they actually embracing scientific thinking when solving problems? They combine this with one free-form feedback question to catch any blind spots.
So instead of asking, do you like your boss, they are asking behavioral questions that proved whether the system is working. This creates a remarkably accurate quantitative baseline of your qualitative culture. It diagnoses system effectiveness, identifies gaps, and allows you to track your cultural progress over time, just like you would track financial progress.
It moves culture from a philosophical debate into an engineering problem that can be solved.
Okay, I want to talk about the sample company mentioned in the presentation, because this story really grounds everything we've talked about. It highlights the absolute paradox of the best factory.
This is a fascinating example.
So the sample company has multiple factories. They decide to run this Shingo Insight Assessment, but they don't run it in their worst performing facility, which is what you would expect. They ran it in their absolute best performing factory, a factory that was already top rated by all of their own internal maturity checklists.
Which seems completely counterintuitive at first glance. Why invite an external, intense audit into the one place you already know is doing great?
Right. The old saying is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why would leadership specifically invite an external behavior-based reality check into their star facility?
Because the leadership was wise enough to know the difference between compliance and excellence. The presentation outlines 3 specific reasons why they targeted their best factory. Number 1, they wanted to validate true maturity. They had to ask themselves, are we genuinely strong in the operational excellence principles, or are we just really good at checking off the boxes on our own internal checklist?
Oh, that is such a dangerous trap. Think of it like a student who gets an A+ on a math test because they memorized the specific answers on the study guide, not because they actually understand how to do math.
Right.
Give them a slightly different problem and they fail. The leadership wanted to know, are we actually a great factory, or did we just memorize how to pass our own internal audit?
That is a perfect analogy. It's incredibly easy to build an echo chamber. Reason number 2 was to find system constraints. Even in their absolute best factory, they knew there had to be bottlenecks. They wanted to know which invisible management systems are secretly limiting our long-term efficiency.
Because even the best engine has friction.
Exactly. Remember, if you don't manage the culture, it manages you. They wanted to find the invisible ceilings that were holding back even greater performance.
And what was the third reason?
Number 3, to spot early warning signals. They understood a profound truth about business. Behaviors are the ultimate leading indicator.
Leading indicator.
Yes. By the time a problem shows up in your key performance indicators, your KPIs, like quarterly revenue or defect rates, the damage is already done. They wanted to know what behaviors were hinting at future risks long before those risks ever hit the bottom line.
Behaviors as leading indicators, that is so smart. If people stop feeling safe reporting small errors today, you will have a catastrophic failure in 6 months.
Exactly.
The financial KPI won't show the problem until month 6 when the product is recalled, but the Shingo Insight survey shows you the behavioral shift on day 1.
It's a difference between driving by looking out the windshield versus driving by looking in the rearview mirror.
Oh.
KPIs tell you where you've been. Behavior tells you where you are going to crash.
Wow. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? If you are sitting there nodding your head because you've experienced that brutal swish decline after an improvement initiative, or if you simply have a burning desire to know the true, unfiltered maturity level of your own organization's culture, this presentation offers a very clear next step.
It does.
Evgeny and the Shingo Institute suggest booking a call to officially assess your maturity and your readiness for what they call the Shingo Challenge. It's the first tangible step to making the invisible forces in your workplace visible.
And that is a critical journey for any leader or team member. Because as we have seen today, we moved from understanding the frustrating trap of the swift decline to realizing that it is the underlying culture, not just the fancy new tools, that dictate success.
Absolutely.
We explored how overarching purpose and specific systems drive human behavior, and how those systems must be carefully designed using the Shingo guiding principles. Principles like empowering quality at the source and thinking systemically.
Right.
Finally, we saw that measuring this isn't guesswork. Tools like the Shingo Insight Survey can mathematically map the health of your culture to provide early warning signals before disaster strikes.
It is a complete paradigm shift. You stop obsessing over managing the output and you start managing the environment that creates the output.
Exactly.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We learned today that if you don't manage culture, it manages you. I want you to look very closely at your own team or organization tomorrow. Ask yourself, are the management systems and workflows you currently have in place secretly rewarding the exact behaviors you are desperately trying to eliminate?
That is the big question.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked some major aha moments for you and give you a new lens to look at your workplace. Keep learning, keep questioning the systems around you, and stay curious. We will catch you on the next deep